What are objectives and key results? So this is just a little slide which talks about the anatomy of them. So you could kind of say there are sort of broadly well, there's two parts to objectives and key results, but it's important to remember the third one as a separate thing. So what's an objective? The objective is, where do I need to go? Where am I heading to? What's the ultimate destination that I'm trying to get to? So the objective should be statements that inspire and really set direction. And I've just rather randomly come back from a trip to the Antarctic on holiday, and the fantastic historian on board was telling us about these amazing explorers, incredible people who set off to discover the South Pole. And actually, it really made me think about the parallels and how critical it would have been for them to effectively have objectives, key results, and initiatives, which I'll come on to. So their objective, if I was Scott of the Antarctic and my goal was to discover the South Pole, well, that is a very, very clear objective. Where do I need to go? I need to get to the South Pole before the Norwegians. That would have been my objective. Very simple and straightforward. That was my goal. Really inspirational, setting direction, really clear what I wanted to do. So that's the objective. The key results then are, how do I know I'm getting there? How can I tell if I'm on track to actually get to the South Pole before the Norwegians? So they really measure progress towards an objective. So the kind of key results that Scott might have had might be, well, I need to have got to the southern tip of Argentina by a certain date, because if I don't get there by a certain date, then it's going to start to get too close to winter and I'm never going to get to the South Pole. So I need to get to Ushuaia by August, and then my next key result after that might be, well, I need to get to the Falkland Islands as a stopping off point with sufficient supplies to see me through the winter again by this date, or through the summer by this date. So the measure of progress towards that objective, how do I know that I'm getting there, that I'm on track to get to the South Pole before the Norwegians? And then finally, the initiatives. So initiatives aren't technically part of objectives and key results, but it's really important to remember that objectives and key results are not initiatives. The initiatives come afterwards. So what will I do to get there? So how am I going to get to Ushuaia? Well, I need to raise the money firstly, and then I need to hire a ship, and I need to hire the crew, and I need to get all the food together, and I need to book in a port so that my ship can actually dock when we get there. So they are the initiatives that describe the work required to drive the progress to the key results. So in summary, that is what they are, but it's really important to remember: objective, ultimate longer term goal, where am I aiming for? Key results, how am I going to know that I'm okay, that I'm getting there, that I'm progressing towards that objective? And then initiatives that we're not really covering today, that's the next bit, which is, okay, what will I do to get there?
Rachel, can I inject one thing that didn't make it into this deck that's really important? Just, it's the context that your OKR process is your strategy process. OKRs, the process, it's a methodology, if you prefer that word, for seeing that the organization's strategy is successfully deployed, which means communicated to the whole organization and translated and broken down and decomposed to the right functions, departments, teams with the right goals. It also is the strategy execution process, where you track execution from the work, like initiatives and funding, back to show and demonstrate whether or not the work and investment is producing the strategic outcomes that justify it. You see OKRs misrepresented in a lot of different contexts as a performance management methodology, an employee goal setting framework. It relates to those, but it is and should be thought of as your strategy execution, strategy realization methodology in your company. And it's really easy to screw it up and undermine that objective of OKRs if you confuse it with performance management.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Yeah, that's a great point. You're right. We didn't have that in, but that's a great point. So what did make it in, and I think is really critical. So Evan, in his presentation last month, was talking about kind of why, what makes it different? And one of the crucial things about OKRs is alignment. And actually alignment is not just, you know, company, department, team. Cascade, you know, if you do that kind of thing, the cascade is slow, it's ineffective, it leads to lack of alignment between the departments, which is absolutely critical to get everybody in the organization working together to come up towards the same goals. So what real alignment looks like is this: it's the company and everybody around it all aligned in a matrix, so that everybody is completely aligned. And as it says there, you know, horizontal alignment is the absolute killer feature of OKRs, the why, especially in large organizations, because most large organizations really struggle with this, with not having those silos that are working separately, but actually aligning everybody towards the same goals, the same strategy, the same objectives, and seeing those linkages. And then just a little bit more again from Evan about so let's get into a bit more detail. So the objective is the outcome, as we've already said. Objectives would usually be qualitative, they'd be valuable, so they need to have value to the organization. Importantly, they'd be really ambitious and inspirational, which I guess to Evan's point is why it's so critical not to mix them up with performance management, because if my bonus and my promotion depends on hitting my objective, then I'm not going to make it as ambitious and inspirational as it could be. If I was Scott, I'd never have tried to get to the South Pole because, you know, it was so difficult. It was a crazy ambition, really. So they should be really ambitious, inspirational, and ultimately the outcome. And usually sort of longish term. Now, what does that mean? It depends on the company, but certainly a reasonable length of time into the future in order to be ambitious. Then key results are those measures, as we've said, that demonstrate the objectives being achieved. These absolutely are quantitative, so a number, you have to be able to measure them. And normally you'd have 2 to 5 key results per objective. That would be the sort of standard number that you'd have. So 1 objective, 2 to 5 key results, and they would hit those markers. So I'm going to show you some examples now and bring it a bit more specifically back down to marketing. So what does that actually mean for marketing? So these are the kinds of things that marketing would focus on. Standard, looking at some of the funnels. So we need to acquire customers, activate them. We want to retain customers. We might want referrals. We're looking at revenue. There would be some of the standard focuses that we might be looking at. And then what we would then do is ask ourselves some key questions as marketers. So, okay, so which channel are we thinking we might want to focus on this quarter? Have we got some issues here that we're trying to fix? You know, is our relationship with sales broken and do we need to fix that? How are our acquisition costs doing? Are they working for us? And is there any low-hanging fruit? So how can we do some quick things to help us, but equally mix them with some of those big bets? So they might be the key questions that marketers might be looking at. And then in the middle, then you start to think about, okay, so what are the measures then? What kinds of things might we be measuring as marketers that link the ultimate focus of acquisition, let's say, with those questions? So there's some examples on here, standard marketing examples of marketing metrics. So, you know, where do we rank on keywords? How often is our content shared? What's our cost per acquisition? The cost of acquiring non-paying users or paying customers? Website traffic, how many people are coming to it and what do they do when they get there? Click-through rates, what's the engagement, and so on. Marketing qualified leads, conversion rates. So these are all really, really good metrics that as marketers we're probably very familiar with in terms of really thinking about the measures and the impact that our marketing is having, that would be great examples of some of the kinds of things that might become key results. So some examples, specific examples here, again from Ross. So an example of an objective might be to become the #1 online resource for whatever it is, the problem that company solve. And here we sort of touch on you know, we've said objectives should be qualitative. That's got a number in, become the number one, and that's perfectly fine too. And Pam, Nadine, Evan, Ross and I were just chatting before you guys came on, and I think we've all seen examples where actually having some numbers in the objectives really works for companies, and that's, you know, it's an option to put something numeric in your objectives if you're that kind of company. So it's not completely outlawed to have a number in your objectives. It's just more standard for them to be a bit more qualitative. So become the number one online resource for the problems we solve. Key results, 3 key results here. So secure 15 high quality backlinks from influential publications, rank in top 5 traffic, 30% more organic visits to our online guides. So you can see the key results, absolutely measurable, quantitative. You can exactly see what they are and know whether you've hit them or not critically. And also you can see how they clearly align to the objective. If you hit those key results, then you believe you will be further steps towards hitting the objective. Then the same for the second one, turn into a content lead generation machine. So the key results here would be increasing the click-through rates. And this from and to is to my mind, and I hope Ross and Evan agree, really, really good practice, because it tells you the scale of the challenge here as well. So if you've got a verb, increase, the thing you want to do, content click through, then you've got from and to, from 1,500 to 3,000. That's a really great construct, because you can see, wow, we've got to double those clicks. That's quite a challenge. Whereas if you just said increase content click-throughs to 3,000, you wouldn't have quite as much of a view as to how much of a challenge that was. And then 25% of our customers find us through content versus 12% today. So again, you've got the context there of how much of a challenge that key result might be. And then Ross just talked us through this OKR formula. So a nice little way of putting it into a phrase or a sentence. So I will, the objective as measured by the different key results. So you've got the example there. I will increase traffic to my website by 10%, which is the objective. And again, that one's got a number in, which is perfectly fine. By increasing my Twitter following 25%, first key results. Blogging twice a month instead of once, second key results. Promoting paid content on a new specific channel, key result 3. So that's the recap from Ross and Evan. And just before I go into a little checklist, I'm just going to pause there and see if anybody's got any questions, or if Ross or Evan want to add anything to what I've said. No. Okay. Good stuff. Right. So before we get into the breakouts and the practice, then just a little checklist. So you might want to maybe take a photo of this screen, or just jot these things down. And once we get into the breakouts, I can put these in the chats when I get a sec, if that would help. So when you're developing your objective, just think about these 5 things and have a little checklist in your mind whether the objective hits these 5 things. So it should be longer term. So it depends on the company's cycles, as we've said, but probably at least a year. So where do you want to be in at least a year's time, perhaps a bit longer? It needs to be the outcome. What's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is to get to the South Pole. The ultimate goal is to be the #1 brand in our category, or the ultimate goal is to become the best content provider. What's the outcome you're looking for? It needs to be valuable, as we've said, so it has to be something that's going to add value to the company. Ambitious and inspiring and clear. And then key results. So again, 5 checklist items to just keep in your mind. And many people really struggle with this, with the key results being the outcome again. So they're still outcomes. They're not the projects or initiatives. It's not raise the money for the project. It's not deliver the campaign. They're the initiatives. They're still outcomes, measurable outcomes. Where do we want to get to? What's the measure that helps us decide we're on track? Normally shorter term. Again, what does shorter term mean? It depends on the company cycle. But if you work in annual cycles, then you might have 12-week key results. So you'll have 4 lots of key results for the year. Got to be able to measure them in the short term. Otherwise, you're not going to know whether you're on track or not. So something that actually is reportable and measurable, and something that's clearly delivering towards the objective.